Investigators vow more witnesses are coming. Ivanka Trump and Donald Trump Jr. could be on that list. Plus, another big public hearing just announced, this one with Felix Sater, the Russian-born former business associate of Trump. What does he know about Trump's plans to build a tower in Moscow? And more breaking news, Trump reportedly ordering officials to give Jared Kushner a security clearance, despite concerns from intelligence officials. And he said he didn't do it. Turns out it's not true. Let's go out front. Good evening. I'm Erin Burnett. Out front tonight, the breaking news. Michael Cohen coming back. Just wrapping up his third, it was supposed to be his last hearing before Congress. But the committee says there is more to learn. He has much more to tell us.
There's not much I can say other than it was very productive. As I said, I'm committed to telling the truth, and I will be back on March 6th to finish up. There's more to discuss.
More to discuss next week. And tonight we are learning that Cohen is not the only person who, in his case, was, and in some of these other cases still are in Trump's inner circle, who could be testifying before Congress.
If there were names that were mentioned, or records that were mentioned during the hearing, we'll figure out who we want to talk to, and we'll bring them in.
So would it be fair? Would it be fair then to say, if any names came up multiple times in that hearing,
they have a good chance of hearing from us?
Okay, so who were those names that came up multiple times? Well, we went through, we cross-checked it, and during that explosive public hearing that we all saw yesterday, let's tell you those names. It's a who's who of the biggest names tied to President Donald Trump.
Donald Trump Jr., Ivanka Trump, and Eric Trump. Jared Kushner, Keith Davidson, Alan Weisselberg, Ron Lieberman, and Matthew Calamari.
Those are some of the people who know everything. And this is a new reality for President Trump. For 2 years, he'd been protected by a Republican-controlled Congress, and now he is facing intense pressure with Democrats in charge of those key committees. His best line of defense today was to say that Michael Cohen is a liar. Here he is when asked today about Cohen's testimony.
He called you a liar, a con man, a racist. What's your response to Michael Cohen?
Well, it's incorrect, and he lied a lot.
So the president says Cohen lied a lot and he's a liar, except when he isn't.
He didn't lie about one thing. He said no collusion with the Russian hoax. And I said, I wonder why he didn't just lie about that too, like he did about everything else. I mean, he lied about so many different things.
He said, I wonder why he didn't lie about that, just like he did about everything else. So wait, Donald Trump is saying that Michael Cohen lied about everything else, everything but Russian collusion, which means, according to the president, that Cohen was lying when he said these things.
I don't believe Mr. Trump ever struck Mrs. Trump, ever. I don't believe it.
Is there a love child?
There is not, to the best of my knowledge.
Do you have any knowledge of President Trump abusing any controlled substances?
I'm not aware of that, no.
Do you have any knowledge of President Trump being delinquent on any alimony or child care payments?
I'm not aware of any of that.
Do you have any knowledge of President Trump arranging any health care procedures for any women not in his family?
I'm not aware of that, no.
So when Michael Cohen defended the president, I guess he was lying then? Manu Raju is out front live on Capitol Hill. Manu, let's start with this. There's going to be more testimony, and this could be crucial. Of all the names Cohen mentioned yesterday, who else does the committee want to hear from? Who else can we expect to be going in?
Well, certainly members of the Trump inner circle, his CFO of the Trump organization, Alan Weisselberg. He is a front and center of at least two committees, the House Oversight Committee, the House Intelligence Committee. Both want to speak with Mr. Weisselberg, but also people who are part of the president's family, his son, Donald Trump Jr., his role and what he may have known about those hush money payments. His signature was on at least one of those payments that went to Michael Cohen. Ivanka Trump, her name was mentioned. What did she know about the Trump Tower Moscow project that is being investigated by the House Intelligence Committee? What Elijah Cummings, the Oversight Committee chairman, told me today, Aaron, is that at least 5 or 6 House committees plan to investigate all of the allegations that came out of yesterday's testimony, allegations of bank fraud, of insurance fraud, of suborning perjury, of Russia-related matters, all of which several committees plan to split up how to pursue this going forward. So certainly we will see some public testimony for the House Intelligence Committee with that Associate Felix Sater coming forward, but also we will see other committees pushing forward to bring in people who were mentioned at yesterday's hearing. So while yesterday's hearing was very public, we could see others come forward in a very public setting as well. This investigation, as Democrats will say, only just beginning. This is driving what Democrats will plan to do here in the weeks and months ahead. Aaron.
All right, Manu, thank you very much. And I want to go out front now to a member of the House Intelligence Committee. Of course, they interviewed Michael Cohen today. Democratic Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney joins me. And I appreciate your time, Congressman Maloney. So what did you learn new from Michael Cohen today?
Well, I'm not at liberty to discuss the specific testimony except to say that he's a very important witness. We appreciate very much that he came in and was so forthcoming. I thought he was very credible, and he's a big piece of the puzzle here. And in the fullness of time, everything he said before the committee will be out in the public, and I think that's as it should be. For now, what I can tell you is that we're in the middle of this interview. It's going to continue next week, and it's very important, and we appreciate very much how forthcoming Mr. Cohen is being.
All right, so I want to play again part of what Michael Cohen said when he came out of the room where you were today. Here he is.
I'm committed to telling the truth, and I will be back on March 6th to finish up. There's more to discuss.
Okay, I want to get to the truth part in a moment, but first, what more do you need to get at? I mean, these were 3 really long days, and there's still more that you need to learn?
Well, I think what we realize is that the closed-door format with an opportunity to go a little bit deeper, a little more in-depth, allows us to cover a bunch of subjects that didn't get sufficient attention yesterday. And again, that transcript will be released in the fullness of time. But the fact is that there are very serious questions with different aspects of this investigation that Mr. Cohen has very important testimony on, and we again appreciate how forthcoming he's being. Could you share any of the topics
that you think need more drilling down on?
I appreciate the question, but as I said, I'm not at liberty to discuss what happened in executive session, except to tell you that transcript I expect will be released eventually.
Okay.
And what I can tell you is that Mr. Cohen is extremely credible and cooperative. There's not a single question that was put to him that he did not answer, and we appreciate that very much. And I think the efforts to intimidate him or attack him are incredibly inappropriate, and I think he equipped himself very well.
Have you learned anything from him that moves you towards impeachment proceedings?
Well, I'm not going to comment on that specifically. I can tell you we've learned a lot from him, and I've learned a lot of things that I didn't learn from his testimony yesterday. So his appearance is very, very important, and it's very much appreciated.
All right, so when you say he's credible and you're frustrated at people who are implying otherwise, of course, 2 allies of the president in Congress, Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows, you know, they were both there yesterday and they were aggressive in their questioning. They're asking the Justice Department to now investigate Michael Cohen for perjury because of some of the statements he made in his testimony yesterday, right? They submitted a letter of things they said were false. You know, they include that he says he didn't seek a job in the Trump White House, when he did, and they include his denial of committing bank fraud, which of course he has admitted to doing. He's going to prison in part for that. Do you believe Cohen lied yesterday?
No, I do not. And I think that what is absolutely clear is that the Republicans should be a lot more interested in the substance of what he was saying. Remember, yesterday in open session, Mr. Cohen brought documentary evidence that the President of the United States was involved in a criminal conspiracy to obstruct to disguise campaign finance contributions that were improper, and that he engaged in an effort to cover that up while he was president. Now, you'd think maybe that would be of concern to some folks. Instead, they spent their whole time attacking him. And we know he has credibility problems, as any cooperating witness does. But I found him to be extremely credible and extremely forthcoming. And he brought evidence, and that evidence is important.
And to that point, when you say he brought evidence, you're saying, well, you're not taking him on face value or trusting him on things where he did not bring evidence, right? To your point, on the checks, there's a check signed by Donald J. Trump. It's from 2017. That's evidence. But you're not saying to trust him on other things.
No, I think it's important that his testimony be corroborated, but I think it's important that we keep an open mind and we care about the truth of what he is asserting. And when he brings clear evidence really overwhelming evidence that the President of the United States actively engaged in a conspiracy to violate federal campaign finance laws, that he structured payments to disguise the reimbursement, that he did that while he was president. That's pretty serious stuff, and it's well supported. When we go over into the Russia area, obviously we want the same level of corroboration and evidence, and I don't think we should rely on anyone with this.
So meaning like the Roger Stone conversation with Julian Assange, that you want corroborated?
Look, that's an important piece of testimony. It's just one piece of testimony. But this puzzle is coming together, Aaron, and I think that this week will prove to be an absolutely critical week when all is said and done.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time, Congressman Maloney. Thanks.
Thank you.
And next, we have breaking news. The New York Times is reporting this hour that President Trump ordered his chief of staff to give Jared Kushner a top security clearance. This he did even though top intelligence officials and the White House top lawyer told him not to do it. Okay, so not only did he go against his own intelligence officials yet again, he also went against this.
Tell General Kelly or anyone else in the White House to overrule security officials, the career?
No.
Well, is that a lie? Plus, a one-time Trump business associate, Russian-born Felix Sater. You just heard his name. He's going to be testifying publicly before Congress. He's next. What does he know about that all-important Moscow Tower? And Republican Congressman Mark Meadows. He claims there's not a racist bone in his body. So how does he explain this?
We'll send him back home to Kenya.
Breaking news. The New York Times is reporting tonight that President Trump ordered officials to give his son-in-law and his senior advisor, Jared Kushner, a top-secret security clearance last year. Now, keep in mind that he did this even though intelligence officials and the top White House lawyer said that he shouldn't. It alarmed the then Chief of Staff, John Kelly, so much that he wrote an internal memo. And the memo was about how he had been, quote, ordered, this was the word that he used, to give Kushner the top-secret clearance. Then the White House counsel, Don McGahn, also wrote a memo detailing all the concerns that had been raised about giving Kushner the security clearance. So, just to be clear here, so the President of the United States goes ahead and says, orders it, according to John Kelly, going against his own intelligence officials and the White House counsel, gives Kushner the security clearance. That's a problem. But then, on top of it, it appears he lied about it. Here he is just last month, and his daughter echoing what he said just a couple weeks ago.
Tell General Kelly or anyone else in the White House to overrule security officials, the career?
No, I don't think I have the authority to do that. I'm not sure I do, but I wouldn't do it. Jared's a good. I was never involved with his security. I know that he, just from reading, I know that there was issues back and forth about security for numerous people, actually, but I don't want to get involved in that stuff.
The president had no involvement pertaining to my clearance or my husband's clearance.
Okay, well, let's go now to one of the reporters who contributed to the story, Matt Rosenberg, national security reporter for the New York Times. Our White House correspondent, Caitlin Collins, also joins us, and former FBI Special Agent Asha Rangappa. All right, Matthew, let me start with you. Look, it's pretty amazing, right? I was never involved with the security. I know just from reading. Well, it appears from the reporting that you all are putting out, not only did he know that John Kelly felt that it was a, quote, order from the president to give Kushner that security clearance. Tell me about it.
I mean, at this point, I think the president, we have to ask, does the president understand the process? What we were told is that, Jared had numerous problems. They went back to the very beginning of the administration. Finally, last year, the president said give him a security clearance, and that John Kelly understood it to be an order. He wrote a memo about it at that time. In addition, Don McGahn, the White House counsel, wrote a memo outlining kind of the issues here. And yet, because the president definitely does have the authority to order somebody to be given a clearance, Mr. Kushner and Ivanka Trump both got their clearances.
So the president is saying he was not involved at all. I mean, that's clearly false, right? John Kelly interpreted it to be an order. Even if perhaps that word is a matter of interpretation, the president was not being honest when he said to you all, when he was in that interview in the Oval Office with Maggie a couple weeks ago, when he said, I was never involved with his security. I know just from reading. That's not true.
Yeah. I mean, our reporting directly contradicts that. And we know from multiple intelligence officials that there were numerous concerns raised by the FBI the CIA, the NSA, about Kushner's dealings with foreign businessmen who had ties to their own country's intelligence services, concerns about his judgment, whether he had the proper discretion to be trusted with American secrets, whether he had entanglements overseas and potential business opportunities that would create situations in which he could potentially be compromised.
I mean, Asha, you know, we know there's been reporting, right, that there were at least 4 countries, Mexico, China, the UAE, Russia, that, you know, had felt that they could use Jared Kushner in some way, right? He updated his security clearance form and it included 100 contacts with foreigners that he had not included. These are the issues, among others, that were with his security clearance. What do you make of this reporting from Matt and the New York Times?
Well, Aaron, we were trained in the FBI to conduct security clearances, and there are 9 different areas that agents will ask about when they do this. It's character, associates, reputation, loyalty, ability, finances, bias, alcohol, and drugs. And anything that raises concerns in any of these areas could be a reason to delay your clearance. The 2 most common reasons to delay or deny a security clearance are either financial issues or foreign influence. And these are the 2 things that Jared pinged on. And the reason here is that, A, you don't want someone who has either divided loyalties or people who can compromise you or have any kind of leverage over you in a financial capacity. So it's really astonishing that these concerns, which were raised by multiple agencies, were not heeded. And I think it kind of goes to how much this administration really cares about the trustworthiness of the people who hold this sensitive information. And of course, the ultimate arbiter is the person sitting at the top.
And Caitlin, I mean, you know, you hear obviously the reporting here that he went against the recommendations, very clear recommendations, and had them do it anyway. And then, you know, I guess, let me just replay it because I want everyone to hear it, right? The reporting is that there's these memos that Kelly was ordered by the president to go ahead and give the clearance to Jared Kushner. And then this was a year ago. And then a few weeks ago, the president is directly asked about it by Matt and his colleague Maggie Haberman. Let me play it.
Tell General Kelly or anyone else in the White House to overrule security officials, the career.
No, I don't think I have the authority to do that. I'm not sure I do, but I wouldn't do it. Jared's a good. I was never involved with the security. I know that he, you know, just from reading, I know that there was issues back and forth about security for numerous people, actually, but I don't want to get involved in that stuff.
The president had no involvement pertaining to my clearance or my husband's clearance.
So the reporting now directly contradicts every single thing that they just said, Caitlin. Does the president, when he said this a few weeks ago, he knew it was untrue? You just think nobody would look into it? It wouldn't matter. No one would find out. But he wasn't telling the truth, it seems.
Well, and that's what's fascinating if the president was operating under that impression, because Jared Kushner's security clearance, as well as Ivanka Trump's, has been a subject of discussion since last spring when all of this came to the forefront because of Rob Porter, that staff secretary who was accused of domestic abuse. His security clearance, he was having trouble securing one, which is unusual for that staff secretary job where you handle so much paperwork. And that's what put attention on Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump's security clearances. Now, Aaron, at the time, our reporting showed that they were actually blaming John Kelly, the chief of staff, for the holdup in their security clearances because they thought that he had something against them because they were the president's children. There have been questions about whether or not they should be working in the West Wing, and they had blamed John Kelly for it. So it's interesting, based on this reporting from the New York Times, it was actually the president who ordered John Kelly to be the one to authorize them to get this security clearance so they could operate under this. So it raises a lot of questions about that role. Also, Aaron, I'd like to point out that right now Jared Kushner is on a tour through the Middle East, pitching his Middle East peace plan right now to several countries. And now that is something he only had access to some of that information because of the security clearance he got. Because before this, he just had secret, which isn't enough to get access to all the information he would need for that.
And Asha, you know, there's also the issue of there are now people actively leaking things from the now former chief of staff and White House counsel, these memos, which the president no doubt thought would not get out. Now these kinds of things are coming out.
Yeah, you know, I think what is important here is that, look, at the end of the day, the president does have the authority to make this kind of decision. This is something that people should consider when they decide who becomes the president. If that person is not trustworthy, then they may have people who are not trustworthy to get clearances. But the problem here is that he continues to demonstrate a lack of transparency. If you're going to make a decision, then at least be accountable for it. And I think he believes that he's unaccountable. And the fact that these people continue, whether it's in the FBI or John Kelly in his own administration, to have to document it tells you how out of the beyond the pale they believe these decisions are.
All right. Thank you all very much. Poignant final words there. If you don't think someone's trustworthy, then you should consider whether you want them to be the person deciding on security clearances. Up front next, breaking news, the Russian-born businessman at the center of the Trump Tower Moscow deal. He's now going to be appearing before Congress for us all to see. What does he know? Plus, Republican Congressman Mark Meadows. He says there's not a racist bone in his body, despite saying President Obama should go back to Kenya. New this hour, House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff announcing that former Trump business associate Felix Sater will testify publicly March 14th. Now, Felix Sater is a really important name. He was born in Russia, played a key role in trying to make the Moscow Trump Tower happen. And a project, of course, we have learned was being discussed all the way until the election, despite what then candidate Trump initially and publicly and repeatedly claimed, which is right, that he had nothing going on in Russia, nothing at all. Obviously, that was not true. Out front now, CNN senior justice correspondent Evan Perez, former assistant attorney for the Southern District of New York, Harry Sandick, and former advisor to four presidents, David Gergen. So, Evan, let me start with you. Felix Sater, how significant is it that Mr. Sater, who had a key role in the Moscow Trump Tower project, the plans, the discussions there, is going to be testifying?
Look, I think it's very significant simply because he is at the center of this project that for many months we were told the president had abandoned, that the candidate Trump had abandoned, that it was something that had been put aside while he ran for president. And we find out that was not true, that these were discussions that were going up. Now we now learn from Rudy Giuliani all the way through the election. So I think it is very important that Felix Sater, who is someone who obviously has mob ties, Russian mob ties, going back to the 1990s. Yeah. That's where he got in legal trouble previously, and yet he still ended up being close enough to the president, had an office on the same floor as the president, according to Michael Cohen's testimony yesterday. So, look, there's a lot that Felix Sater can shed light on as a result of where he was.
And so, Harry, at that point, what Evan just mentioned, Felix Sater was close. Okay, there's a lot of things that prove this to be true, not just his involvement on Trump Tower Moscow and other projects, but what he said about this office in Trump Tower that he had, or I'm sorry, what Michael Cohen said. Mm-hmm. Let me play the exchange yesterday that is about Felix Sater and his office in Trump Tower.
Isn't it true that because of Mr. Sater's relationship to the Trump organization, that he had an office in the Trump Tower?
And on the 26th floor, Mr. Trump.
And the 26th floor is important. Why?
Because it's Mr. Trump's floor.
So he had an office on the same floor as President Trump.
In fact, his office, when he left, became my office.
And isn't it also true that convicted Russian mobster Sater even had business cards indicating that he was a senior advisor to Donald Trump, as reported by the Washington Post?
Yes.
Did convicted Russian mobster Sater pay rent for his office?
No, he did not.
Okay, Harry.
It's kind of an interesting person to have around. I mean, to say the least, right? He is a logical person for Congress to want to hear from. He may well already have met with prosecutors. One would assume that if the Mueller team is interested in Trump Tower Moscow, and we know they are, they talked about that in their submissions in Michael Cohen's case, then certainly Sater would be of interest to them and now also to Congress. And, consistent with what people talked about yesterday, so Trump surrounds himself with Michael Cohen, who by his own admission has done some very bad things in his life, 500 threats to people, and also with Felix Sater, who has these convictions.
So let me just, David Gergen, do we have Donald Trump talking about Felix Sater? Do we have it? Okay, so you just heard what Michael Cohen said, right? That Felix Sater got he got Felix Sater's office when he vacated on Trump's floor. He had his senior advisor to Donald Trump as his business card. He works on Donald Trump's floor, didn't pay rent for his office. So when Donald Trump is asked about Felix Sater, this was a few years ago, here's what he said.
About how many times have you conversed with Mr. Sater Over the years?
Over the years, if you could estimate.
Not many.
Not many.
If he were sitting in the room right now, I really wouldn't know what he looked like.
This is chilling. It's chilling to think that a Russian mobster had an office on the same floor. And clearly, Cohen had a major office, a corner office, or something very close to Trump. And now this Slater comes in there. I do think, this is the first of a number of people we're going to see who are going to be testifying both in public or in private as a result of the Michael Cohen testimony yesterday. He has put a spotlight on some people that Congress is going to feel emboldened now to bring in and push hard.
I mean, and Evan, it is when you hear that, it is a person whose business card says senior advisor to the President of the United States, and I'm sorry, to Donald Trump, who was not yet president. And when Donald Trump was asked about this guy a few years ago, he's like, I wouldn't even know him if he walked in here. That is chilling to hear.
No, it is. Look, and I think we have to sort of step back just a little bit and remind people, it's very rare actually for us to see public testimony like this from someone of this, someone who's got this kind of station, frankly, this close to what became the President of the United States. And so I think it's going to be very important to hear this, partly because, look, even if he has been part of the Mueller investigation, we don't know how much of this will ever be made public from the Mueller investigation. So this is why public testimony that Congress can order is very, very important for us to sort of get the story, for us to understand exactly what happened, because we may never hear this from Mueller himself.
And these are crucial for that respect. And Harry, when it comes to Trump Tower, right, in Moscow, that, of course, the president repeatedly said, discussions had ceased, right? And Michael Cohen said that under oath, then came and admitted that that was false, right? It continued up until the election. Rudy Giuliani has even admitted that. So Trump Tower Moscow is important because, well, what happened? Who were they trying to sell things to? And in exchange for what? Let me play this exchange from yesterday.
Did Mr. Trump tell you to offer Vladimir Putin a free penthouse?
No, ma'am.
So
that was Felix Sater. It was a marketing stunt that he spoke about.
So Felix Sater had suggested to you that Mr. Trump offer a penthouse to Mr. Putin?
Yes, because it would certainly drive up the price per square foot.
What's the significance of that if it happened?
I mean, it looks like something that's part of some quid pro quo. I mean, we don't know the full context of that offer, but while running for president, while taking positions on issues relating to Russia, while making statements about Putin during the campaign, while changing the Republican Party platform on the key issue of the Ukraine, he is simultaneously talking about offering a $50 million penthouse to Donald Trump, to Vladimir Putin, in a building that could never be built in Moscow without Vladimir Putin and the Russian government's approval. To do business with Russian businesses, you're doing business with the Russian government, and that's Putin.
Right, and Trump knew that. Go ahead, final word, David.
And it was going to be the tallest building in all of Europe if it were built.
Yes.
I mean, wow.
Yeah, I remember going there looking at where they were saying it would be at the time.
Here's where I think what's happening, though. The larger picture is there's a lot of talk now that Mueller report will be damaging, but it will not be legally explosive. That he will not nail Don Jr. or the president or anything like that. And so I think there was, from a Democrat's point of view, there was a concern that if he came in with a relatively clean bill of health for Trump, there would be enormous pressure from the Republicans to close down further investigations in Congress, stop piling on. I think Cohen's testimony bolsters the Democratic view. No, there are other things that are really important that we need to know about our president.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Evan. And next, the Republican congressman accused of racism in the Michael Cohen hearing, now on the defense about these comments.
We'll send him back home to Kenya or wherever it is.
Plus, President Trump's shocking comment today about Otto Warmbier, the American student who died after being tortured and imprisoned in Kim Jong-un's North Korea. The president siding with Kim. As an example to refute Cohen's allegations of Trump's racism.
You made some very demeaning comments about the president that Ms. Patton doesn't agree with. In fact, it has to do with your claim of racism. She says that as a daughter of a man born in Birmingham, Alabama, that there is no way that she would work for an individual who was racist.
Okay, Meadows is still dealing with the fallout today, and he is taking the issue head on.
Anyone who knows me knows that there is not a racial bone in my body.
Up front now, Mia Love, former Republican Congresswoman, and Karen Finney, former senior spokesperson for Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. Okay, Congresswoman, you know Mark Meadows. You have worked with him, right? You've got personal experience with him.
Yeah.
You know, he brought out Lynn Patton to say, you know, look, here is an African-American woman. She worked for Trump, so therefore Trump can't be a racist. Do you agree with Mark Meadows that there is not a racial bone in his body?
Well, first of all, the exchange between Mark Meadows and Representative Tlaib, I thought the way that Chairman Elijah Cummings handled that was absolutely respectful, civil, and just classy. I know both of them very well. They have a great admiration for each other and great respect for each other. I also know Mark Meadows really well, and I call him like it is. You could see he was incredibly emotional.
Yes,
and I know him very well, and I can tell you that I have experienced nothing but a kind, respectful human being who did not, that respected me and admired me as a black woman.
All right, so Karen, obviously that is significant coming from Mia. She knows him. Meadows, you know, yesterday, when he was in this exchange with Rashida Tlaib, which I'll play more of in a moment, but, you know, what she's saying is putting up a black woman and saying, oh, here's a black woman, and so, you know, he can't be a racist because she says he's nice, is in and of itself racist. He obviously, as Mia points out, he got very emotional, and he says he is not racist because, in part, he has family members of color. Here's what he said.
My nieces and nephews are people of color. Not many people know that. You know that, Mr. Chairman. And to indicate that I asked someone who is a personal friend of the Trump family, who has worked for him, who knows this particular individual, that she's coming in to be a prop, it's racist to suggest that I asked her to come in here for that reason.
Karen, what do you make of that logic?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, first, let's start with what happened in the hearing. I certainly can understand from Congressman Meadows' perspective why he would not understand that for many of us, you know, former Congresswoman Love may not be one of them, watching what he did felt very racist. That felt like a racist act because simply saying, oh, look, I had a black person who worked for me, and by the way, racism is not just about black and white. I have a black person who works for me, therefore, I'm not racist, when particularly we know, for example, that it was the practice of the Trump organization, their real estate company, to mark a C on the applications of people of color, of black people back in the day. That was their practice. So merely then putting up one person, you know, is not the way to dispel racism. Now, I also thought that the comment, frankly, from Mr. Cohen was kind of a sideshow, and it felt like Lanny Davis maybe had him to throw that in there, you know, and I don't think it was on point. But I have to say something else here. I am a biracial person. My mother's family, we are descendants of Robert E. Lee, so it doesn't get any more, you know, to the south than that. And my father, I am a descendant of slaves. We were owned by the Finney plantation. And what I can tell you is I have white members of my family. They are good, kind-hearted people. They don't think of themselves as racist, but they still do and say things that are absolutely racist. And I still find myself from time to time having to say, and have throughout my life, having to say, hey, you got to be careful what you're saying there because this is going to be perceived as racist. So when we talk about racism, what we have to understand is part of getting through these barriers, part of understanding each other is understanding the perspective of the person who is saying, hey, that felt racist to me. That act felt racist. It's not about whether, and I hear that Congressman Meadows was, you know, he was offended and upset, but the real way you move forward is to say, I hear what you're saying. I don't agree with you. That's not what's in my heart, but let's have a conversation about this.
I mean, I guess the question is, you know, his response to this, and, you know, I played a moment ago, right, when he said, you know, we're going to send Mr. Obama home to Kenya, wherever that is. That was obviously a few years ago, and he's admitted that he shouldn't have made those comments, right? He's apologized. But is the response to what he did yesterday, instead of saying, there's not a racist bone in my body, to say, I didn't mean that to be that. And I am very upset someone could have felt that way, and I apologize. I mean, is there a way that he could have handled it better instead of to say there's not a racist bone in my body? Which sounds a little bit Howard Schultz-like, you know,
okay,
like I don't see color.
I don't think that, first of all, to assume that this person was brought in as a prop, I think that that's actually an injustice to a woman who decides to stand on her own, whether it's being example of what's being said by Representative Meadows. I think that, you know, she got up there, she stood on her own, and she's the one that decided with her own mind to stand there.
But he still offered her as evidence that someone's not racist.
Wait, let me finish. Let me just finish. He shouldn't have. I don't think that was the place for that. As a matter of fact, you know, I think unfortunately being racist is not a crime. It's stupid. You know, I look at it's just that shouldn't have been the place for that, and to actually give any credit to Cohen for bringing some of these things up, I think it wasn't the place for it, and I think that that's where Mark made a mistake. He shouldn't have done that. But again,